Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, June 8th, 2020, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the 2020 election if Joe Biden wins by double digits. Essentially, I'm going to give him a 10-point margin of victory on the popular vote, which I'm going to just adjust the 2016 numbers 10% over to the left. I know this isn't always going to be super accurate, but when we're talking about 10%, I guess a margin of victory popular vote-wise, pretty much Hillary Clinton underperformed in a number of states based off her popular vote margin. She won by 2.1% nationwide. That's actually a pretty substantial margin, very notable for someone who lost the election. Al Gore's margin was a lot closer than that, around 500,000 votes compared to almost 3 million in 2016. So Hillary Clinton, despite winning by 2.1%, lost a number of states by less than 1%. States that were crucial, at least would have been crucial to her win and were crucial to Donald Trump's victory in 2016. So in this scenario, I'm essentially taking her margins of victory and adding 7.9%, considering that she had won by 2.1%. I'm adjusting for the fact that she did underperform and overperform in some of those states, so I'm not going to add a just solid 10% more to each of those states, and the results are actually pretty shocking. I expected this margin to be a lot better. If there was to be a 10-point margin, it probably would have to do with the fact that there's increased turnout, and I honestly don't think it's realistic at all, but I do think that the map would end up shaping up a little bit different than this. But since we don't have any preliminary turnout numbers for the 2020 election, considering that we're just around 5 months away, we're going to stick with the 2016 data. And I wasn't going to do the 2018 House election popular vote in each state because, again, that could be influenced by obviously being a Democratic wave year. So we're just going to go to the most recent presidential election, and also the Democrats won the popular vote then. So this is actually very interesting. I want to talk about it because it's fascinating to look at some of these states. When we're looking at the overall electoral map, some of these states don't even flip from Donald Trump to Joe Biden with a 10-point margin, and it's actually very surprising. We're going to start this off by showing exactly how bad of a point Donald Trump is at on the presidential map right now. Later today, I will be releasing a video discussing the fact that Donald Trump defies all odds and hits another low point in his presidency in terms of approval from the country. He has a 57% to 38% approval rating nationwide as of the most recent CNN SSRS poll. I know some of you guys may not necessarily like CNN as a pollster, so I'll go ahead and use the NPR poll, which shows a 12-point negative margin, actually larger than 12-point negative margin, 12-point negative margin between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But after I made that video about Donald Trump hit Joe Biden hitting double digits in nationwide polls, new data was released that was even worse for President Trump. And I honestly did not think it was going to get any worse than that. And I also do want to discuss the direct implications on down ballot races, because in my last video, it was more so the presidential level. But Donald Trump, if Republicans are to win in 2020, they will be riding on the coattails of President Trump. And data point after data point is coming out with bad news for Donald Trump. I will also be making a video discussing the preliminary Georgia primary results because it's a very, very big increase for Democratic vote compared to 2016. So that also needs to be discussed as well. But let's go ahead and characterize all of the safe states, and there aren't that many. We're going to characterize all of the states that would still be considered safe in the Donald Trump column, even after, a Joe Biden victory of 10% more nationwide. I'm doing 10% because it is the bare minimum, and I don't think that it would necessarily be fair to go 15, 16, because that's just realistically never going to happen. 10% is a little bit more realistic, but it's still narrowing down to less than a 5% chance of that happening. But again, if Donald Trump continues at this rate, the national polling data was correct in 2016. The national popular vote data was correct. The polling data accurately reflected what we saw on the election. And then, if Donald Trump's down 7.9% nationwide on election day, what if that's accurate? I know it seems like it couldn't happen because it didn't in 2016 and it didn't in 2008 and it didn't in 2012. However, there's a very much stronger opposition to candidates other than Mitt Romney and Hillary Clinton and John McCain than what we saw in the past. So I will say that it's going to be again, it's probably going to reflect, the polling data is probably going to reflect what we actually see. So Nebraska at large. Nebraska's 3rd district is actually the only district in there that actually goes safe for Donald Trump. North and South Dakota, Tennessee, West Virginia, Oklahoma, and Wyoming. So that's only 62 electoral votes for Donald Trump that would still be considered safe. I think that it is pretty substantial to show that states such as North Dakota and South Dakota, which were within less than 10% in 2008, have since moved over into the safe Republican column and will continue to do so in 2020. I just think that's very fascinating, considering that states such as West Virginia and Arkansas and North Dakota and South Dakota were mildly close compared to where they are right now in 2008. So I just think that's something to point out. For the likely Republican states, I think this is going to be a little bit better for the GOP. Taking a look at some of these likely states, they aren't going to lose by a very, very large margin. It's still going to be a loss for them, obviously. You can't come back from a 10-point deficit nationwide, but the fact that some of these states will remain in the Trump column actually baffles me. Even the margins from 2016, Donald Trump ran up the numbers. He had a very, very large victory in a number of these states, enough so to keep them in the safe column or the likely column for him in a re-election bid where he loses. And the Democratic candidate outperforms Hillary Clinton's margins by 7.9% in each state. Still holds on to some states that are pretty surprising. You will see near the end. Let's go ahead and finish up the characterization of some of these races. So this actually puts Donald Trump at 125 electoral votes. These are actually the states that I always consider safe. All the states that are likely and safe right now are the ones that I always characterize for Donald Trump as either safe and maybe likely for South Carolina and Mississippi. Other than that, these states probably will be safe in 2020. But it is just very interesting that these states don't even narrow down to lean, which shows how solid they are for the GOP. A 10-point margin nationwide is pretty substantial. Because of the fact that we're working with a very divided electorate, I think that's the reason why the popular vote won't necessarily mean that there will be an overall electoral college landslide for Joe Biden. When we think about, let's see, back in 1972, that was the time Richard Nixon won 49 states. He won the popular vote by around like 22%. And then in 1984, the next time a Republican candidate won 49 states, Ronald Reagan won by around 18% nationwide. So, I do understand, but even if I did apply the margin of, let's say, 18% more based off the Hillary Clinton vote from 2016, Donald Trump would still get more than just one state. It would not be as big of a landslide of what we saw back under Ronald Reagan or Richard Nixon in their reelection bids. So, again, goes to show how divided this nation actually has become. We're going to go ahead and speed through the lean Republican states, but I will tell you that they are pretty surprising. Actually, no, we'll go to the safe Democratic states because I do want to leave those for the last because they do hold some pretty interesting information, pretty surprising. So a number of states that were considered likely, or not necessarily likely, but the margins were within the likely column, have now moved over into the safe Democratic column. I don't think it's too surprising to anyone to see states such as that of Illinois and New York move over into the safe Democratic column. New Mexico actually joins the bunch as a safe state with a margin of 16.11%. Statewide, it's the only state that was a toss-up state, less than 10%, that ended up moving over into the safe Republican or Democratic column. Obviously, it would only move to the left as a result of these numbers. Let's go ahead and see. I think that's pretty much it in terms of safe states. Oh, and Maine's 1st congressional district is a safe district for Joe Biden. So that actually puts Biden at 188 electoral votes in terms of safe states. Let's go ahead and move over into the likely Democratic states. So we have actually some pretty substantial ones. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Florida, Virginia, Nebraska's 2nd district, Colorado, Nevada, Minnesota, and New Hampshire. So let's go ahead and characterize those. So that puts Joe Biden at 306 electoral votes, actually the same number as Donald Trump in 2016. I think that it is pretty important to say that even in a 10-point margin, Virginia, Colorado, and Nevada are still going to be likely. I don't think that would actually happen on Election Day because I do think that these states have since moved to the left. But again, I don't have any presidential election data to indicate that, or at least indicate what the 2020 popular vote expectation will be and then adjust it based off of that. But I think that it is also important to note that Florida has now become a likely Democratic state. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, all swing states, have become likely Democratic states. So pretty solid margins for the Democratic Party, to say the least. So that leaves 107 toss-up electoral votes. I think actually Maine's 2nd district remains. Yeah, that one I still have to cover. And then Maine. Sorry, that one is also a likely characterization. So 308 electoral votes for Joe Biden and 125 for Donald Trump. So that leaves us 105 toss-up electoral votes. Let's go ahead and look at the lean Republican states because it is very interesting. Even in a scenario in which the margins are improved by 7.9% statewide and overall to a 10-point margin nationwide. Maine's 2nd district remains in the Republican column. Texas remains in the Republican column. and Iowa remains in the Republican column. So Iowa, a state that Joe Biden and Barack Obama carried twice. Texas, which hasn't gone to a Democrat in a very long time, but I will say that it has been narrowing up recently. It was a 2-point margin in the 2018 Senate race between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke in a statewide race, very substantial. And Maine's 2nd District, which went to Obama twice. Very, very big flip over in favor of Donald Trump back in 2016. Drastic improvements for him. I mean, we're talking about a 20-point swing in the district at least, based off the 2016 margin. So even in this scenario, Donald Trump carries it. As for some of these lean Democratic states, that leaves states such as Arizona, which I think actually might end up being likely at this rate. North Carolina goes to Joe Biden, and so does Georgia, which finalizes the Democratic number at 350. But wait, I forgot Ohio. This is the only state that actually ends up being in the tilt column in favor of Donald Trump. Now, Ohio, been a battleground state for a long time, 60 plus years of accurately predicting who will be the president, at least voting with the winning ticket for 6 decades. And it looks like even in this scenario, they break that. Ohio, I do think does have a possibility of going to Joe Biden, but I will say that tilt margin is very fascinating, to say the least. We're talking about the battleground state of Ohio, one that was contested in 2004 insanely. 2008 went to Obama very quickly. 2012 was crucial to Obama's, at least the realization that Obama was going to win, and called very early in 2016. So while this state itself would be the closest in terms of the presidential margin, it still ends up going with the losing side, and not by a little. Donald Trump loses this election by maybe not a landslide for sure, but a modern day landslide, if that makes sense. It's not a 49-1 state majority, but I will say that this is likely the farthest where the Democrats will get, and I think this map accurately reflects that. Even if you shift all of those 2016 numbers, either one proves that Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate for the Democrats, or two, that Donald Trump was a very extraordinary candidate for the Republicans, probably a combination of both. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Please consider joining my channel as a member, and I will see you all later today.